Welcome to our continuing study of the book of Revelation as we seek to read and understand the book. In chapters 1 through 16, we have the first two visions. In this video study, we review chapters 1 through 16, getting ready for the third vision, which will begin in chapter 17. The third major division of the book is set off by the same internal marker as introduced the first two visions in the Spirit. You can read that in 17:3. So here is a review. This review is somewhat lengthy, but necessary to keep the entire contents of the book in front of us. If you're studying carefully, you may be able to skip over this review, but for most, it will be helpful to summarize the book to this point. The first vision, which I have described as the Son of Man vision, chapters 1 through 3, gave us access to 7 letters to 7 churches, addressing the condition of the churches in the midst of enemies, persecution, affliction, times of suffering and death, martyrs following in the footsteps of the faithful witness, Jesus Christ, giving witness unto the time of their own death. And this vision then promises the presence of Jesus among the churches. These letters are dictated by one like a Son of Man. John is to write them down in a scroll. This is the book of Revelation. The second vision in the book, the primary apocalyptic message of the book, the center part of the book, contained in 2 scrolls, chapters 4 through 16, concerns things that are and things that will come after these things, echoing chapter 1, verse 19. The book of Revelation naturally divides into 4 visions, each of them introduced with the phrase "in the Spirit." And in each one, John is in a different location: Patmos, heaven, the wilderness, a high mountain. Within these 4 visions are the things that John saw or heard. How many visions are there in the book of Revelation? Well, there are 4 visions in which various things are heard and seen from different vantage points. The second vision, again, the central apocalyptic vision of the book, is introduced with a throne scene, assuring the readers that God is on the throne and that the Lamb is active in the affairs of the world, chapters 4 and 5. A sealed, 2-sided scroll is introduced in chapter 5 by a strong angel with a question: who is worthy to open the scroll? The Lamb is worthy and will open the sealed 2-sided scroll. Then in sequence, each of the 7 seals is opened by the Lamb, clearly communicating, again, that heaven is in control, chapters 6 through 8. The 7th seal leads to 7 angels with 7 trumpets of warning and judgment, chapters 8 through 11. This action is also controlled by heaven. And so in both sequences, both the seals and the trumpets, the 6th item is followed by information designed to prepare the readers for what is to follow. Giving more detail in these 6 seals, thinking about chapter 6, the 6 seals reveal the presence of conquest, conflicts or war, famine and hunger, death. There are martyrs under the altar, the 5th seal, and God's continuing judgments in the world, all part of a world under God's control, the Lamb opening and controlling the seals. And in that kind of world, 2 questions, the question of the 5th seal and the 6th seal, are paramount. How long will the persecution of God's people last? And who can escape the wrath of God in the land, which is exhibited in an earthquake, the 6th seal. There is intervening information in chapter 7, the interruption, the intervention, a behind-the-scenes look, assuring the reader that martyrdom is not a judgment of God. As we heard in the 5th seal in chapter 6, the persecution will continue a little longer. The message is that God protects his people. In chapter 7, the people of God are identified, sealed, protected, both in their earthly existence, in a picture of 144,000, and in heaven around the throne, the great multitude who have come through a tremendous affliction. The beginning of chapter 8, verses 1 through 5, gives us a view of heaven after the 7th seal is opened. Before the 7 trumpets begin to sound, prayers are being heard, heaven is furious, judgment is coming, thunder, voices, lightning, earthquake, and then 6 trumpets. The promise of protection and deliverance, chapter 7, is confirmed in chapters 8 and 9 as the heavenly angels sound their trumpets. Judgment comes, but God's people are untouched. 4 trumpets impact the natural world. The 5th trumpet shows evil unleashed upon those who do not have the protective seal of God, destruction on the destroyers, and the 6th trumpet unleashes armies from the east, cavalry riders on horses that bring plagues on the evildoers who remain impenitent. The last 3 trumpets are called woes. After the first and second woes, that is, the 5th and 6th trumpets, we're ready for the third woe in the seventh trumpet. But first, again, we have intervening information. Chapters 10 and 11, John has shown two things that will prepare God's people for what is yet to be revealed. The second part of the vision, the little open scroll, the two witnesses. This behind-the-scenes information follows the sixth trumpet. The parallel passage in chapter 7 also prepared readers for what was soon to come. So in chapter 10, we have a little open scroll. The strong angel of 10:1 with a little open scroll reminds of the strong angel with the sealed scroll in chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. And John learns that there is more to the story. There is more to be written, more to be prophesied. He must prophesy the contents of the second scroll. The scroll is already open, ready to occur. Old Testament background provides clarification. Some of these things I have mentioned. I will not mention them again. Time doesn't permit. When the angel speaks like a lion in 10:1, Old Testament parallels show that judgment is indicated. John hears the voice of the angel announcing God's judgment, but the judgment of the seven thunders is sealed. The angel assures that despite the sealing of God's judgment, there will be no more delay. In the Bible, a mystery is something that has not yet been made known. Here, the mystery was announced to the prophets, but has not yet been fulfilled. But the time for fulfillment is at hand, after the seventh trumpet. The little scroll and its contents must soon take place, and John is to prophesy immediately after the sounding of the seventh trumpet. So here, persecution is soon. John takes the scroll, sweet, because the enemies will be destroyed, bitter, because the persecution is not yet over. More witnesses will be martyred for their faithful testimony. And so we have the temple measured and two witnesses preparing God's people again for what is to come. The measuring of the temple says that the church is protected in the midst of affliction, persecution, even martyrdom. Two faithful witnesses are killed and then resurrected, which works for God's redemptive purpose to cause others to give glory to God. In Zechariah chapter 2, an angel measured the temple before it was rebuilt. Here, the spiritual temple is measured and therefore preserved. Only the court and the city are trampled by the opposing nations. The 42 months of suffering places a limitation on the suffering, using the same time period as Daniel's prophecy. As the church gives testimony about Jesus, it is spiritually secure, but exposed to suffering and death. The two witnesses prophesy powerfully for 1,260 days, 42 months. During the period of persecution, the numbers are symbolic, again, taken from Daniel. The witnesses faithfully prophesy in the midst of persecution, and the opponents are powerless against their testimony. But when the witnesses finish their testimony, the beast comes up from the abyss, and incidentally, this is the first mention of the beast. In Daniel's prophecy, beasts represent nations, and this beast makes war on the witnesses and kills them, but they remain dead for only 3.5 days. They are resurrected and taken to heaven, signifying their vindication. The question of the martyrs in chapter 6 is being answered. How long? The number of martyrs is not yet complete. The protection of God's people does not always preclude death. In Revelation 7, John hears of 144,000 before he sees the great multitude. Some think they're the same group based on the hearing-seeing sequences of Revelation. But then we come to the conclusion of chapter 11. This section we're reading in verse 14 concludes with an earthquake. God judges those who oppose him and his people, but again, the effect is limited. The testimony of the witnesses, God's actions in judging, convince some to give glory to God. But after the intervention, after the behind-the-scenes information, the second woe is finished, the third woe is soon to come, and so we have the sounding of the seventh trumpet, warning the third woe. In chapter 8, verses 1 through 5, after the seventh seal, before the trumpets, we were given a view of heaven. Here, after the seventh trumpet, before the little scroll is revealed, we get a view of heaven. God's fury has not subsided. His promises are certain, and we see that in the Ark of Testimony, the Ark of the Covenant. We see lightning, voices, thunder, an earthquake, hail, and that figure we will see again in chapter 15, as John concludes his prophecy about the little open scroll. So in 11:15, the certainty of God's victory is affirmed. Heaven rejoices. The time is near to reward faithful witnesses, to destroy destroyers. That was the message of the fifth trumpet, destruction coming from the abyss to destroy the destroyers. So the stage is set. The time has come to hear the prophecy of the little scroll. No more time extension, no more delay. After the seventh trumpet sounds, the current situation has been described, what has been, what is, what continues, but the focus of the apocalyptic vision now will turn to what will come after. God will give victory over the enemies of God's people, over Satan, over the beast, over the false prophet. The details of this victory are the subject of the little scroll. And that all gets us ready for the third vision, the third division of the book. In this second vision, which we have recently studied, we remember that the mystery of God is finished. Satan battles against heaven and then against God's people. We have two signs in chapter 12, the woman about to give birth, reprising history back to the beginning, back to the birth of Jesus, the glorious messianic community, bearing God's glory, the woman who will give birth. And then a second sign in heaven, the heavenly battle described, Satan, the dragon, the defeat of Satan, but Satan will not quit. Earthly persecutions continue. And so Satan then recruits allies, two beasts, evil, human, thinking about the open abyss of the fifth trumpet, remembering that beasts in Daniel's prophecy represented nations, a sea beast, an earth beast, these two beasts, and the need for patient endurance, because these allies of Satan will represent the very epitome of human evil, and saints must endure in the face of that evil. But in chapter 14, the forces of the Lamb will be victorious, the 144,000 seen again with the Lamb on Mount Zion. Three announcements: the gospel, that is also a gospel of judgment, the fall of Rome, the fall of Babylon, that is, and judgment on the beast worshipers. The earth is reaped, and the grape harvest is thrown to the winepress of God's wrath. Getting us ready for the final plagues of God's wrath, chapters 15 and 16, bowls of God's wrath, the summary of the war with the beast, a victory song in chapter 15, verses 3 through 4, a short chapter getting us ready for the anticipated judgment that we read about in chapter 16. The plagues of God's wrath, judgment coming, this time upon those who are followers of the beast, and also upon the beast and the false prophet. The last judgment of God upon Rome, upon the two beasts, the assembling of the forces to combat God, no delay between the sixth and the seventh of the plagues of the bowls of God's wrath, and the statement, "It is finished," the story of Rome's overthrow being told in 5 short verses at the end of the chapter. But that's getting us ready for the third vision, which will give more details about the overthrow of Rome. I hope this summary has been helpful. I know I've moved rapidly. Perhaps you can review. Let's be ready as we prepare in our next video to continue our study of the book of Revelation. Reading and understanding will come to Revelation chapter 17 and the third vision of the book. Looking forward to seeing you then.